And hello again, everybody. Welcome inside the VIBELAND Sports Studios. I'm Todd Miller, joined this week by Casady Fletcher. Our buddy KP is under the weather. He will rejoin us next week. We've got a lot to get to, but interesting interview today coming up, Casady, with Michael Catterson. A lot of people might be going, well, who is he? Well, he's only kind of a big deal. He's the head athletic trainer at Jenks High School, and we are going to discuss injuries in sports, more specifically football, and what, in his opinion, and he's been on a lot of different committees and such, can be done to make youth sports safer. Michael Catterson of Jenks High School will join us coming up in segment number 2. How are you, my friend?
Doing pretty good, Todd. Happy to be back here in the VIBELAND studios, and unfortunately, we're a man down today, but we're going to try to power through it.
Let's talk about the Van Poll question of the week last week. Of the NFL's 8 unbeaten teams, which pair are you buying the most? And here's what's ironic. There were 8 last week. 5 of those lost. 69% of you said Dallas and Green Bay. I agree with that, but both of those teams lost, and both are headed for a big showdown in Texas this coming Sunday. 17% of you said Kansas City and Detroit. The two teams played on Sunday. Kansas City came from behind to beat the Lions 34-30. 8% of you said the Rams in San Francisco. The Rams looked awful. I mean,
Yikes.
Awful defensively against, of all teams, Tampa Bay. Gave up 54 points to the Bucs last weekend. San Francisco, they survived. They're one of 3 unbeatens. And New England, Buffalo, 6% of you said you're buying into those two teams as well. And if you're not buying into Buffalo yet, perhaps Casady, you should. I think they proved that defense is pretty legit last week in a 16-10 Bills loss at home to the Patriots.
Yes, yeah, they definitely have the defensive skills to go very far this season. I think that they just ran into a juggernaut in New England and their defense, which is, I think, hands down the best defense in the league. And I think the Bills are going to be okay this year. I mean, they're going to be contending towards the top of the AFC, and I'd like to see what it looks like at the end of the season for them, because if that defense keeps rolling the way it is, they're going to win a lot of games.
As a guy that likes the Buffalo Bills, has always liked the Buffalo Bills, I hope that they have a chance to make a push for a wild card. They're not going to beat New England in the AFC East, but if they can stay healthy, and that's already an issue because Josh Allen, their quarterback, is banged up. We don't know how severe his injuries from last week were, but he may be sidelined for a while. If Buffalo can stay relatively healthy, I think they have a chance in a wide-open AFC to make a push for a playoff spot. Let's talk about the National Football League, Mr. Fletcher, and let's talk about those 3 remaining unbeaten, starting with Kansas City. This is how far the Chiefs have come. That's a game that the Chiefs of old lose. They were far from their best at Detroit. Patrick Mahomes, this shows you how great he is. Did not play spectacular. He didn't rush for a touchdown, nor did he throw for a touchdown. But yet the Chiefs still were able, against a determined Lions team in Detroit, to come from behind and win 34-30.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. What the Chiefs are able to do on offense is, you really can't slow them down whenever they are clicking on all cylinders. It is just the best you can do, I think, is probably hope that you limit them to a field goal. Again, when that offense is operating at the highest capacity that it can. And I thought that Mahomes did a very good job of leading a comeback victory. And it's something that I haven't seen just a ton of from the Chiefs and Mahomes, but that was a very good game for them. I think they went in there, had, again, a lot of high expectations. The Lions are good at this point in the season. At least it looks like they're going to be a decent team. And so winning on the road is always tough in the NFL. Coming back from on the road is even harder, and they were able to do that. I've got to give big props to Kansas City, and that team, Todd, they're going to be challenging New England, I think, at the end of the year once again.
I still have a little question mark with the Chiefs' defense, but their offense is so explosive. I think that's not an issue. And they are so deep on the offensive side of the football at receiver. I mean, keep in mind, Hill's not even playing right now, and the number 1 running back is down. Some people may have scuffed at the fact that Chiefs immediately picked up LaShawn McCoy after he was cut from Buffalo. By the way, that looks like a brilliant move, and not a surprising move from Andy Reid to pick up maybe one of his favorite former players in Shady McCoy.
Yeah, he already knew exactly how to utilize them in the offense. And with the Chiefs, they have so many weapons, and they're so creative with the ways that they get all those different guys involved that you just kind of had to expect that LaShawn McCoy is going to come in there and find a way to be productive. And he's, stepped right into that role and done exactly what they needed to do or what they needed from him. And if you're looking for maybe a flex guy for your fantasy football league, it may not be a terrible pick for the next few weeks.
Still not buying one of the three unbeaten teams, San Francisco. They have yet to face the two big boys, Seattle and the Rams, in their own division. I think they will come back to earth, but with Garoppolo now fully entrenched under center, he's healthy to this point, the Niners are much better than they have been in previous years. We talked about the Patriots' defense. Kansas City clearly has a much better offense than the Patriots. New England, though, is just dominated on defense. I think this is the best defense, perhaps, that Tom Brady's had in his run in Foxborough. They finally gave up an opposing score last week against Buffalo in a 16-10 victory.
That's pretty stout right there. They had not allowed a touchdown to that point in the season. And look, I think that, like you're saying, Todd, we know what you're going to get when Tom Brady is operating with that offense. He always finds a way to do whatever he needs to.
And by the way, how about him throwing a pick in the red zone last week?
Oh, man. That's
another sign that we're living in the end times, perhaps.
Oh, yeah. That could, too, be a sign that, Tom Brady may actually be
human.
You're right. A little bit human, not a full cyborg, at least, to my knowledge. And but that defense, Todd, is unbelievably good. They, from front seven, they can do whatever they want. They are very deep at every position. Secondary, they're fantastic. They don't have any holes on that defense. And again, I think it is the best defense in the NFL, and that is a very scary proposition. If you like parity in the NFL, it's looking like New England's probably going to be walking to another AFC East championship, and they're going to be right there. I mean, I fully expect that they're not going to hit any road bumps that they can't overcome until at least the AFC championship, and when I think they're going to go up against the Chiefs.
I would have guessed before last week, and I would have picked the Rams to be the best defense in the NFL. You can't say that right now. 54 points to Jameis Winston and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know everybody has bad weeks in the NFL. That's why I'm not convinced anybody's going to go undefeated anymore. I'm not convinced that the Miami Dolphins are going to go winless, even though they're historically bad, because you just have weeks like this.
That's right.
But the difference is the Rams, for as good as they are, did not step up and find a way to win that shootout. 54 points against Tampa. Come on, guys. That's not what Super Bowl contenders do.
Not at all. And, I mean, they had a game like this last year where they were in a shootout with Kansas City. And, I mean, you totally understand that one. That was just two of the most high-powered offenses operating at their peak abilities. And it looked like a college, like a Big 12 football game. But that was not the case in this last meeting. They were just bad on defense. And the offense didn't help. They had some turnovers that I don't think they necessarily helped their defense out much, but for the most part, it was just bad play by that defense, and you cannot go. And I think it was a franchise record, or close to it, for Tampa Bay in points scored. And I mean, you're giving up 50 plus points. That's just not what you want to see from any defense in the NFL. But like you're saying, Todd, the Rams are a Super Bowl contending team this season, but they're going to have to figure out how to at least pump the brakes for opponents' offenses.
As we ask you in our fan poll question of the week last week at VIBELAND Sports on Twitter, which pair of teams do you buy into the most that were unbeaten? Not unanimously, but in a heavy manner. 69% of you said Dallas and Green Bay. Both were involved in really big showdowns in week number 4, and both did not play very well. We'll start with Green Bay. Thursday night game against Philadelphia. The Eagles look like the team that I thought they were going to be all season long. Probably saved their season, Cassidy, by going into Lambeau and really dominating the Packers.
Yes, and It's so hard for me to give any credit to the to the Eagles, but they look good. They went in there, they did what they needed to do, and this is why last week I was saying I have some question marks about what Green Bay has done so far to the season. They just with Aaron Rodgers and that team, I feel like you have games like this, and maybe this is just an anomaly, and we're gonna see them get back on track and do what they need to do moving forward. But for now, I, I think that the Eagles are a scary team in that NFC East. And if you're the Cowboys, you better be looking over your shoulder because, I mean, all of a sudden, after a slow start, they're just a game back. And then with the Packers, I think it's going to be a tough division up there in the North for them. It's very crowded.
I like the Vikings to win the NFC North, but boy, did I look like an idiot Sunday. I mean, they looked terrible against the Bears. The Bears may have gotten a break. Mitchell Trubisky is out for a while, and they may get some decent quarterback play now. I know that's not who they want, but we've talked about Trubisky on this show ad nauseum, and I'm not a fan of him. I don't think he is a great NFL quarterback. He's very limited skill set. We're going to find out now if they are indeed better. Speaking of the Packers, they have a big showdown this week in Texas with Dallas. Mm-hmm. The Cowboys absolutely had a chance to step on the throat of the Philadelphia Eagles, and as they always do, they find a way to not get it done when you need to get it done. I said the Eagles saved their season. They did. They could have been 1-3. Dallas a chance to go to 4-0. 3 games back after 4 weeks. That's very difficult to make up. Mm-hmm. Not only does Philadelphia impressively go to Green Bay and win, the Dallas Cowboys can't score an offensive. Well, they did score 1 offensive touchdown against the New Orleans Saints without Drew Brees. I'm not going to bury the Cowboys. I still think the Cowboys are as talented or more so than anybody in the NFC. I still think they have as good a chance as anybody in the NFC to go to the Super Bowl. But if you want to go back a couple of episodes and listen to me talk about why I don't trust the Dallas Cowboys, the New Orleans Saints game is just that. I'm not blaming it on any one person. I'm telling you that's just what the Cowboys do. Just what they do. They had buried 3 horrid teams to start 3-0. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm still buying into the hype. But they apparently weren't quite the way they looked against the lowly Giants, who they got without Daniel Jones, and they're playing better. They beat Washington and Miami, who are horrendous, at a combined 0-8. So the Cowboys fail in their first test of the year. Can they or the Packers bounce back this week? One of those 2 teams desperately needs a victory.
Yes, and I think you're going to get a very good game because of that. You got 2 teams coming in that are hungry for a win, that need a win to get back on the right track. And I think for the Cowboys, a lot of it comes down to Ezekiel Elliott and what he's going to do. I didn't think he had a great game on
the whole offense
Sunday.
Stunk. They had less than 250 yards.
Awful. Dak, obviously, his early season heroics, they were, pretty much snuffed out completely. The Cowboys did not look great on Sunday, and it was the offense that really was struggling. And because the defense didn't allow a touchdown to New Orleans, I still have a little bit of faith in that Cowboys defense. I think they can still get it done. You hold a team to 12 points.
You ought to win the football.
You should come away with the win.
Especially the weapons on offense.
Come on. And so I feel good about the Cowboys. I think they're going to get it back on track. And that offense is just, there's too many weapons. We've seen it early in the season, what they can do. They just got to, I think it, again, comes back to, you have to establish that run with Zeke, and that opens things up for Dak in the passing game. With Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers has a lot of the burden on his shoulders for that offense. And if he can find a way to bury the Cowboys like he always seems to do, he is a Cowboys killer. Every time they seem to play, it comes down to one of the last 5 minutes of the game, and you know that Aaron Rodgers is going to lead some kind of game-winning drive against the Cowboys. It just happens. It's inevitable. And so if the Cowboys are able to jump out early, I think that's how they're going to win this one because, again, for some reason, whatever it is, Aaron Rodgers seems to have the Cowboys number, and it's a good matchup for him. And but this Cowboys defense is a little bit better than I think it has been in previous seasons.
These are two, I think, playoff quality teams.
Absolutely.
I think they will both be in the playoffs. I picked them to be there, but it's going to be interesting to see which one of the teams shows up. Will it be the Dallas teams we've seen early? Will it be the Green Bay teams that beat Chicago and Minnesota? Or will it be what we saw from both last week? Before we go on and talk college football, I want to give you my condolences to you and your wonderful family. I know that you buried your grandfather this week. And what an impressive man he truly was, Casady.
Well, thank you very much, Todd. I appreciate that. And yeah, it was definitely a tough weekend for my whole family, but it was also great to just come together and get everybody in the same room, telling stories about just this great man. He had such an accomplished career and such a full life that he lived, 90 years, and we're going to miss him, obviously, terribly, but I thought it was a very good service that we were able to have, and it was. I just hope we did him justice and did the memory of him justice. But thank you very much.
My thoughts, my prayers, all my love to you and your family. I know that he's in a better place, but that still doesn't mean we don't miss him down here for certain.
That's for sure.
Let's talk about college football. The Sooners, no problems with Texas Tech. I actually got to watch that game in person. And, man, I'll tell you, Matt Wells, who's a native of Sallisaw, Oklahoma, that dude has his hands full. Now, I know they didn't have the starting quarterback. That would not have mattered the way OU's defense played. And the Tech defense is one of the worst tackling defenses I've seen in a long, long time. They've never been known for great tackling out there anyway, but this went above and beyond, I thought, Saturday.
Oh, my gosh. First off, just talking about that OU defense, I mean, it was, late in the third quarter before Texas Tech even converted a third down?
They were 1 for 14.
Wow. That is impressive.
And that's a stat that I'm glad you brought that up. OU is very, very high in like the top 2 or 3 in the country in third down opponent conversion. Nobody believes that, but that is to be true. And I think that's a sign of what Alex Grinch and the toughness that he's bringing to the OU defense. Now, is this the defenses of the 80s and 90s? No, but they are much, much better.
Yes, and it's a mentality change for him because it's very similar to the same guys that were out there last year. I mean, there's very few changes on that defensive side, but they are just flying around to the football. They are swarming. And Texas Tech had really no chance. Anytime they tried to run up the middle, they were getting stuffed by 3 or 4 guys. I thought the front 7 did an incredible job of getting a lot of penetration and making it to where the passing game was even disrupted and almost non-existent for the Red Raiders, which you expect them to come out and throw it all over the football field. But it's very positive for the Sooners that they again, it's a Big 12 team. I thought that's their biggest test of the season to this point after a fairly soft non-conference schedule, but they passed it with flying colors. You've got Jalen Hurts still just rolling that offense. The way that he was finding Rambo during that game, they've developed such a great chemistry already. He's hitting Rambo for 40, 50 yards a pop, and that's not even what I would consider OU's best receiver. You got CeeDee Lamb, who had 3 touchdowns in that game. So it's incredible to see how he's distributing the football and how everybody is getting involved. But the one thing that I do hope is that Kennedy Brooks is not going to be out for too long, or if he is going to be out at all, I know that
It's a good thing they have KU this week.
Oh, yes. Hopefully there's nothing lingering and he can get back to full strength by Texas.
Couple of things, one of which, and I'm not being a homer, until somebody proves me wrong, I'm right on this statement. The difference between the University of Oklahoma and the other 9 teams in the Big 12 Conference is mind-blowing right now. I mean, OU is a machine, especially on the offensive side of the football. Could they lose to Texas? Sure they could. Could they lose at Oklahoma State? Likely, because those games usually are very close in Stillwater.
Yep.
But right now, the gap, especially the talent gap between OU and everybody else in the conference, is mind-blowing to me. How about the news last week? Trajan Bridges, the 5-star wide receiver, goes to the coaches and says, I want to play defense. I want to help you in the secondary. He goes to the defensive coaches, starts practicing with the defensive backs, and played in the backfield. Limited amount of snaps. Very, very unselfish player to me. I think it tells me one of two things. One, he practiced against that secondary and knows they're not very good and knows they need help.
Yes.
Or, he just is the ultimate team player. And I think it's both. I mean, 5-star recruits don't normally do that. Now, Bridges did have a couple of personal fouls against him. That's some emotion he's going to have to rein in a little bit going forward.
Sure. Yeah. And he did have a couple of those big penalties, but those will get cleaned up as he gets more reps in there at that position. And for the most part, though, I was pretty impressed when I heard that story. Just thought that's what this OU team is doing right now. They're so deep on the offensive side, and I think Alex Grinch is so the way he's got the mentality of the defense going right now is, look, if you're not getting it done, I'm going to find somebody that'll get it done over here. And Bridges said, okay, well, I'll be that guy. Let me give it a shot. And he got his opportunity, and he looked pretty good out there. Again, except minus the penalties, I thought he was, just fine out there. Did a good job. And we'll see if that's going to be something that continues for the rest of the season or if he's going to get an expanded role. I would expect the more reps he gets back there, the more that he's just going to get comfortable and that Grinch is going to say, well, heck, let's just leave him out there, see what happens.
By the way, Sooner Nation, if you haven't already done so, you better catch the CD Lamb show pretty quick because this thing is quickly coming to an end at the college level. This dude is going to be a first-round draft pick and, in my opinion, has a chance to be a very good professional football player. So his days in the Sooner crimson and white jersey are limited. If you haven't seen him yet, see the CD Lamb show, and he put one on against Texas Tech. Also, good win for Oklahoma State last week. They beat Kansas State, who had been playing just about as well as anybody in the conference, certainly better than most teams. Cowboys still having some problems on offense a little bit, but the defense played well. Probably their best defensive game of the year against arguably the second-best opponent they've played.
Yeah, they're definitely stepped it up on the defensive side of things, and that offense, though, they've got to find ways to get people outside of Chuba Hubbard involved on a regular basis. And look, I know he's great, but I think Spencer Sanders is a quality quarterback, and I'd like to see them put the game in his hands a little more often, and I think it could even open up more for Hubbard when you're not having to go up against stacked boxes like he's starting to face now, because people know, okay, if you can slow him down, then you can slow down that offense. But I thought they did a very good job of powering through and winning a tough game because it had a rain delay in it. That's always hard. Anytime that you throw a kink into a game day protocol or whatever, especially at that level when everything's so regimented, you show up at the same time every week, you do the same thing at this time, and then you have to go into the locker room for an extended period of time. You don't know what you're going to see coming out of those delays like that, and OSU was able to stay focused and come out and put together a pretty good game. And again, right now it's win and move on for the Cowboys, but that was a pretty good win for them.
I'm going to be a Spencer Sanders fan up until Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, same.
I love his skill set. I love how mature he is for his age. He is willing to accept the blame and doesn't like all the credit. I just think he's a stand-up guy, and the Cowboys, you're right, maybe should utilize him a little bit more. 296 yards for Chuba Hubbard. A lot of the Cowboy fans starting to chirp, why is he not being in the Heisman Trophy talk? Again, I'll tell you what I said way back when. I don't think the Heisman Trophy should even be talked about before October. Mm-hmm. We are in October now, but there's so many preliminary games, and people don't play good people early. Let's wait till you start playing teams in your conference. And Hubbard has been pretty good in Big 12 play. 296 yards against a pretty decent K-State defense. He went for 120-something, I believe, against Texas, but he did it in over 30 carries.
Like
that hurts him in the eyes,
carries,
I think, of a lot of people nationally.
Totally agree. He's a workhorse back, and he's going to get a lot of touches. And again, I think that right now that are just almost running him into the dirt. I think this could have long-term implications for the season, though, with him touching the ball as much as he is. Uh, I think at some point you're going to start seeing diminishing returns from him. So to answer the question about the Heisman race right now, sure. I mean, put anybody up in there because again, it's all going to sort things out. Everybody's played 2 conference games to this point at most, and they haven't played enough people yet. Is the overall point. And by the end of the conference season, or even midway through, you're going to start to see some of these guys fall off. They're going to have some losses.
But this is why I have a problem, Cassidy, with all the hype back in August and September. Because once you get on that list, it's hard to get off. You may not win it. You could play yourself out of it. But it's almost very difficult if you're not on that list to play your way in it. It doesn't happen very often. And I think people make up their minds. I think Chuba Hubbard should be talked about as a Heisman Trophy favorite. Or not a favorite, but a candidate.
Sure.
Now, I agree with you. I think the production is going to drop off a little bit because of his workload. But he is a special, special player. And he has earned the right, I guess, to this point, to at least be mentioned among those that are in Heisman Trophy consideration. But again, it's October the 1st. Who cares? We shouldn't even be talking about it before now.
Right. It's so early on in this season that, yes, he's been one of the best players in college football this season, definitely one of the best running backs. And I think for that reason alone, put him on a list. But again, those lists should have probably 10 names on them right now, and we should whittle them off as we go or add people on as they go. I'm okay with having a wider Heisman conversation rather than just like the 3 guys that they say back in, like you're saying, Todd, August or sometimes even in the spring game in April, the year before. You're going to see all these sports writers start talking about who their Heisman picks are for the next season, and it kind of gets set. They set the narrative so early that for someone to jump in, you have to have games like Chuba has been doing, where you're getting 200 and almost 300 yards a game, and you're doing it against all opponents. Now, the best team they played this season against Texas, he, again, had over 100 yards, but he had to touch it nearly 40 times to get those yards. So that is something that I would like to see them play a couple more good defenses. And if he can put up good numbers against them as well, then yes, he stays in that conversation. But why not? It's October 1st. I think anybody that's had a good season to this point should be in Heisman contention.
He's Cassidy Fletcher. I'm Todd Miller. This is episode 30 of VIBELAND Sports, a presentation of VIBELAND Media. Coming up next, after this break, we'll hear from the head athletic trainer at Jenks High School, Michael Catterson, and we'll talk about the injuries in sports, how serious and the threat for long-term problems are for young athletes, and what can be done to make games safer. Michael Catterson joins us next here on episode 30 of VIBELAND Sports. Welcome back to this segment on episode 30 of VIBELAND Sports. I'm Todd Miller, visiting with Michael Catterson, who is the head athletic trainer at Jenks High School. And Mike, I appreciate you taking time. There's so many things going on in your world, some of which is very, very exciting. Unfortunately, this time of year, some of it is very, very sad. First of all, thank you again for taking time to join us.
Oh, no problem, Todd. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about our profession and what we do as athletic trainers in the secondary school.
Okay, you have been well-traveled, which means you're very versed, I think, and probably have a diverse outlook on your profession. You've done a lot of things in your education. You've also been at the high school level and at the Division II level as far as training is concerned. Do you feel like that's prepared you for about anything you will see?
Yeah, I think so. Experience at the college level, working in the clinic, being on the academic side for a little bit, and then finally settling down in the high school. When I was on the academic side, I'd always tell my students that were studying to be athletic trainers that the high school setting could be some of the most challenging, just because you have such a wide variety, or just such a large population of athletes that are participating, or student athletes that are participating. Is we don't typically see all those kids transition up to Division I, Division II athletics. So, in my experience, the high school level, we'll have more opportunities to encounter kids with say diabetes, seizures, asthma, things like that. Not that those kids don't, move up to the NCAA ranks or the college level, but they're, much fewer than what we see as far as numbers and things like that. Also, when we're at large school like Jenks here, just at the high school, we have over 800 student athletes. So between in-season sports, out-of-season sports, we never really know what's going to come through the door on any given day. A lot of times, okay, we know ankle sprains, knee injuries, things like that. But, there's been cases where we've had an individual come through with or we've had to deal with, say, anaphylactic shock on a particular day, and then have to enact emergency action plan to take immediate action in order to help that individual. So it definitely keeps you on your toes, and that's what I love about this setting is it's a challenge every single day.
Don't you agree, Mike, that your profession has changed so much, even probably in the 35 years since I've been in school? A trainer, an athletic trainer, does a little bit more than tape ankles and wrap fingers. I mean, as you mentioned in that last statement, there's a lot of different bases that you have to cover on any given day in your profession.
Oh, by far. I got into this profession on accident. I chose it out of the catalog at TU because I thought it was going to be the easiest profession. I matched up against all those majors. And then as I got into it, I was like, holy cow, this is, basically med school compacted into an undergraduate degree. But since that time, let's see, I graduated undergrad in 99, but since that it's moved from a bachelor's program to a master's level degree program now. And I think it's really kind of garnering the respect of kind of going more from an athletic position to more of a healthcare professional. And that's, one of the things I think a lot of the coaches nowadays have, as they've been, athletes or coaches, they've always had, or hopefully have had encounters with athletic trainers. So it's a little bit easier to kind of describe our jobs, but, we're also kind of seeing that more transition from, again, more of that assistant coach position to more of a healthcare clinician. And that's how we kind of, I didn't say spin it here, but how we inform our parents. Hey, I'm usually going to be the first responder, whether it be, with a head or neck injury, or, recognizing if an individual has, say, a skin infection like staph or, some other condition. And then I'm going to contact them and get them, referred into the right place so that they can get the best, healthcare for their student.
Don't you agree that your profession has really evolved into several different levels and precautionary measures just in the last 10 years or so? Because when I was in high school, the example was a concussion. You got your bell rung, get back into the ball game. Now it's you go through protocol. I mean, safety is of the utmost importance for you and your staff.
Definitely. Each year we know more than we do the previous year. So, I kind of look back 20 years ago, some people may forget that even longer than that, Howard Schnellenberger, when he was coaching at OU, the first year he came in, he's like, okay, we're not going to have water available during and we've obviously have evolved past that. And we're still making strides in, say, heat illness awareness, things like that. But it's the same thing in the concussion sphere. Last 5 years, last 10 years, just the advances in the knowledges that we know as far as how to handle concussions, the concussion management, and the safe return back to play. And then on top of the return to play, it's also return to learn for the student athlete. So a lot of times when I have conversations with a student or their parent, I kind of use the example of an ankle sprain. So with an ankle sprain, you're going to see it swollen. You're going to be limping on it, everything like that. So it's real obvious that you should probably take some time off for practice, ice it, do rehab, everything like that. With concussions, the signs and symptoms aren't always quite so visible or obvious. And if the student or the parent, coaches, aren't in tune with what to look for, they might miss it. But then we also know that as we're kind of moving them, progressing them not just back to athletics, but also in the classroom. We here at Jenks, we have a return to learn protocol. So every concussion, each teacher gets notified about that concussion. They have accommodations in the classroom. because it would be just going out there and running on an injured ankle. It's just going to make it worse. So that actually delays the healing time and everything like that. So, and that's something that just became a part of the Oklahoma concussion law in 2016. So it's continuously evolving.
Michael Catterson, the head athletic trainer at Jenks High School, is our guest here on VIBELAND Sports. Mike, you have had a hand in setting some of the standards as far as precautionary measures are concerned with the OSSAA. Has that been one of your more rewarding aspects of your career?
Yes. I always feel like we could do more in those aspects, but it's one of those things is I'm blessed to be here at Jenks. We have great facilities, great, individuals, things of that nature. And we're able to have 2 athletic trainers here, but there's approximately 63% of the schools in Oklahoma that don't have athletic trainers. And so try to get a balance of, what can they incorporate that doesn't necessarily need an athletic trainer, or how can we find ways to get them, aware of that, but getting policies, in place and that everyone can follow. So, the concussion law and concussion management with the updates has obviously been big. And then now our kind of current focus is working on, kind of decreasing the likelihood of heat illness. And so just simple tasks that a school could do is, monitoring the what we call the wet bulb globe temperature, but also on those extreme heat advisory days, which this year I think we've had one of the hottest summers. We had multiple days where excessive heat warnings were advised. But one of the simple things that we had was just having a cold water immersion tub. So, a 100-gallon Rubbermaid tub filled with water and ice available, so that if an individual does overheat during practice, we can immerse them quickly. And we have those set up outside the practice field so that they're readily available. Because what we know is that if that individual doesn't get that cold water immersion to drop the body temperature within the first 30 minutes, that could lead to heat stroke, and that is a death that is 100% treatable if it's treated properly. So, and at the high school level, you'd think that, hey, that's just common sense, but as we know, if we've watched, news over the past 2 years, just a couple of years ago at Maryland during off-season training, they had an individual pass away during off-season conditioning, and it basically came down to that they didn't, follow proper protocols. So just simple things, and can make all the difference in the world and athlete safety.
You work at one of the meccas of high school football, so I think it's fair to say that money and facilities and treatment is premium at Jenks High School. But you say there's 63% of the high schools in Oklahoma that don't have any means of trainer available. Does that make it more dangerous to play football at the smaller school level? And is football safe?
I think football's safe, but there's always ways that we can make it safer. And I think that's kind of a constant battle is, whether it be parents or coaches like, well, in my day, we did this or we did that. And my kind of counter to that is like, well, we're no longer running the wishbone anymore outside of a few schools here in Oklahoma. So things change, things adapt. What I've always kind of said is I feel that we're at an advantage if we have an athletic trainer on our sideline at practice every day, during the games, things like that, because we can, we have that daily interaction with our athletes. So we know what's normal, what's abnormal. But then also we can kind of pick up on some of those smaller things. But definitely those 63% of schools that don't have athletic trainers, I think there is an increased risk and an increased liability. I don't want to call people out, but at some point, you have to say, okay, what are we going to do for, our athlete safety? And it's not just athlete safety, it's student athlete safety, because how many of these kids are actually going to go on and, perform at the next level? And not that we want to, hinder anything like that, but it's, success and health and wellness beyond participation of athletics. There's, kind of common saying that if you can't afford an athletic trainer, then you shouldn't, be able to afford sports. I mean, it's almost an indispensable, position. The thing that makes it tough is there's, over 400 school districts in Oklahoma, participating in athletics. So trying to find someone to fit all those spots. But I think we can get creative with different models and placing some of those. I've been in Western Oklahoma, and there's athletic trainers in Goodwell, and there's good athletic trainers in Stillwell. So I think we can find success stories in those, and show other schools like that hey, this is an invaluable position. It's no longer a luxury to have an athletic trainer. It's a necessity.
Since you've been an athletic trainer, I know that the inroads in terms of making equipment, especially headgear, that much safer is infinitely better. Is there still a lot of work to be done as far as helmets are concerned?
That's a good question. I think yes. Compared to what they have been, and and my time as athletic trainer, we just upgraded to the Vices helmet, which is supposed to be one of the better ones on the market, and a couple of other school districts in this area have done that as well. But the thing you have to remember with helmets is they're not designed to reduce concussions. Salesmen will tell you, whatever they want to try to sell a product, but the main purpose of a helmet is to reduce, or is to minimize skull fractures. Now, in that sense, I haven't had a skull fracture, since my time as an athletic trainer. So I think they do their job there, but I think more of the helmet safety and things like that come from officiating, football rules, things like that, where not using it as a helmet, not using the helmet as a weapon. Trying to avoid those helmet to helmet contacts, kind of some of the violent things. Football can be entertaining without having, unnecessary, hits and things like that for those knockout shots.
So basically what you're saying, the key to prevention, as best you can, is not necessarily equipment, it's understanding and being just aware of things that can cause injuries to young players.
Oh yeah, one of the
education,
and I say common sense. One of the first things I noticed when I took over or came over to Jenks, and Coach Trimble was still coaching, is I was we were going into spring football and then even into our fall camp. And we're talking about, progressing the kids from helmets to shoulder pads and full pads. And he's like, Mike, we very rarely will go full pads, and we very rarely will tackle to the ground. He's like, we figured out a long time ago that if we have less injuries in practice, then we have more horses in the stable to when we get to Friday night and everything like that. And we still come out with the same intensity. I think we play hard. We're a tough nosed team. And I think that's more of a discipline and culture nature than it is, hey, let's line up every single day at practice and try to knock the snot out of each other. If Johnny and Joe are injured on Monday and Tuesday at practice, it makes it real hard to get them ready for the game on Friday night.
Of course, the severity of injuries and the potential danger of football always are brought to the forefront when you have a couple of incidents like we have recently had here at Oklahoma with the death of a 16-year-old young man at Southwest Covenant, and then, of course, a couple of weeks ago, a middle school student at Lexington. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do to prevent things like that. I mean, it's just almost a freak accident, isn't it?
Yeah, and anytime those situations arise, even though I'm not at that school practicing as an athletic trainer, I always look at myself and like, man, could I have done something more? Could I have advocated more? Things like that. But when you really get down to it, man, I wish I could say 100% I know having an athletic trainer there would have prevented, both of those deaths from occurring. But not knowing all the facts behind those and all the exact details, I can't say that for certain. As much as we want to educate our athletes, as much as we want to, educate our parents and our coaches and things like that. Sometimes athletes will hide things from us. Sometimes they won't speak up because, they want to, continue playing or whatever. And the scary thing is sometimes a kid will get a release from a physician, and say, hey, they're cleared to play. And, sometimes, that's not necessarily the case with us. I have final say as far as a kid return back from a concussion, but sometimes that kind of ties, the school's hands, like, well, they've got a clearance, they're good to go. The scary thing is I've had interaction with physicians, ER physicians, or even pediatricians who didn't know that there's a return to play protocol, that, some of these other things that we use on a daily basis as athletic trainers in our concussion management, that, I probably see more concussions than, the standard pediatrician. I think I counted up over the past 2 or 3 years, we probably manage between all of our athletes, all of our sports, probably 70 concussions per year. So just kind of knowing that some of those nuances are a little bit different. And like you said, it's the mentality has changed, where it's no longer, okay, you got your bell rung, okay, you can go out and play. Just kind of those little things that, there it's a much deeper, issue that we're trying to look at.
When you look at your job, what are the most satisfying parts of being an athletic trainer?
Oh, I used to say it's seeing an athlete, get an injury, kind of hobble off the field, and then be able to work with them, and through the rehab process and see them return back. And that is rewarding. But, the other thing is to see the kids, succeed in life after they've completed their athletics, and try to be a positive influence on them. So whether they go on to college, professional athletics, that's awesome. And we've had our fair share that have come through here that have continued on, at higher levels. But it's also seeing that kid that, may not be the best athlete, but they grinded out for 4 years here. And you can see from, the discipline that's kind of installed in part of them, that teamwork mentality, things like that. And yes, the coaches had an impact on you, but when they come back, whether it be for homecoming or you encounter them at, the grocery store or whatever, they come up, give you a handshake or a big hug or whatever. And tell you how much they appreciate you just being there for them. And I think that's the thing, is that, I want to heal injuries and everything like that, but I also kind of view myself as a positive role model and have the opportunity to have a positive influence on the kids while they're here.
Michael Catterson, the head athletic trainer at Jenks High School in suburban Tulsa, is our guest here on VIBELAND Sports. Okay, I think it probably differs with every kid, but you can tell me different. At what point does Michael Catterson say you're through? You can't have any more concussions?
That's a good question, because there's not a magic number. So usually what we do is, as we're dealing with an athlete in a concussion, let's say it's their first one. Okay. So we take them through a return to play protocol. Easy way to remember return to play is brain. So once they have no symptoms that they're reporting, what other evaluation tools we're utilizing. So we look at balance, reaction time, and a couple other metrics. But then we look at brain. So that's bike, running, agility, intense exercise, and non-contact practice. So what they have to do is get through that, each level without symptoms increasing or anything like that. And we may have a kid that's for 2 weeks, all they can do is ride the bike because they're getting an increase in their symptoms as they go through. So we document that, everything like that. And then as we progress through the levels and we get back to the point where, okay, we can return back to play. And sometimes we have that injury, and let's say it's their sophomore year and they don't ever have another concussion. That's awesome. What starts to worry us more is let's say it's a less severe hit and it causes another concussion, or on the second one or the third one is those symptoms start to last a little bit longer. And I think the I think the environment regarding concussion has changed a little bit. When I first started here, it was right after the release of the concussion movie, and CTE was on the forefront. And I think it's still kind of, in the back of everyone's, mind as far as participation in sports and things like that. But, I think initially there was like, okay, if you have one concussion, then you have, CTE or the possibility of CTE. And I think we've kind of calmed that fear. It's like, hey, we still don't know exactly what causes that yet. We do think that head trauma has some effect. We don't know the full extent of that. But also know that my job here as the athletic trainer is to, make sure that we don't return to play, too soon, where we have a more severe injury that's going to have more permanent damage. I remember an athlete we had a couple of years ago had a concussion during football, kind of lasted a couple of weeks, cleared before the end of the season, finished the season no problem. But then what started kind of worrying is that he had a car wreck about 2 weeks after the season, hit his head on the steering wheel. And so, again, a concussion that kind of lasted, symptoms lasting for, almost a month or so. And then a couple of weeks after that, it cleared, playing softball and just kind of diving for a ball, and just not even so much the head hitting the ground. It was just more the head shaking, kind of caused some symptoms there. So luckily, at that point, I no longer had to have a conversation. The parents kind of made that decision like, okay, I think we're done with, any type of contact athletics and things like that. So yeah, each one is a little bit different because, I mean, the scary thing is kids are starting, not just football, but, all sports, soccer, things like that, at a young age. And there's kind of a big push to go straight to competitive and get that, where if you're not playing a soccer game every single weekend, or, a baseball game or a baseball tournament or showcase tournament every single weekend, then you're going to miss out on that, college scholarship or pro opportunity. And so again, all that does is just increase the number of risk or opportunities for injuries throughout their career there.
I've got to ask you though, Mike, and you mentioned CTE, and a lot of people relate that to older men playing like in the National Football League, but it could affect football players per se of all ages. Is
Yep.
it dangerous for football because of the young players starting at such a young age and their brains not completely developed? Are they not at more risk maybe for long-term severe complications?
I'm going to say a personal opinion. My son's 8 years old, and we're going to hold off from tackle football as long as possible. He plays flag, and I think it gives him a bigger opportunity to expand, as an athlete. In the years that he's been playing flag, he went from not being able to throw a football to playing quarterback this year, catching, receiving, kind of doing a little bit of everything, as opposed to being stuck on the offensive line or defensive line or things like that. So that's, my personal opinion. Outside of that, I think, the science is still kind of out there. I think we definitely see, what's coming out of the, I think it's Boston University with their, their CTE lab that they have is that the high percentage of NFL players that their brains are being donated, and the high number that have CTE. And I think there's been, at least one or two college kids that have had CTE after their autopsies, and then one or two high school kids. So it's always scary. And I think it possibly can be a lead to CTE, is just the repetitive, hitting over time. But I can't say that's for certain, for fact right now. Like I said, I can only say this is what I'm doing personally for my kid.
All right, you've been very generous with your time. So one more question. Put your crystal
Yep.
ball up there on the desk next to you. Where do you see 5, 10, 15 years from now sports medicine being compared to where it is right now?
Oh man. That's a good question. We've advanced, so much, in the time that I've been an athletic trainer for for 20 years now. I kind of feel weird saying I'm an elder statesman here, but looking down down the road, I hope that we do kind of open some of those unknowns regarding the concussions and the CTEs. I think we're getting closer in those facts, but really my biggest goal and what I would like to see in Oklahoma is just the expansion of more athletic trainers and get the access to athletic trainers to a higher percentage of schools. Like I said, it shouldn't be a luxury for a school to have a healthcare provider, for their student athletes. Again, we can't say 100% certain that they'll be, prevent all deaths or injuries. We can't prevent, injuries from occurring, but we know we can definitely help them heal faster and decrease cost to parents, save trips to emergency rooms, things like that. But also make sure we're providing, the safest environment for our student athletes to participate.
Great stuff, my friend. Thanks for taking time to join us here on VIBELAND Sports.
Hey, Todd, I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate the time.
You bet. Michael Catterson, head athletic trainer at Jenks High School, our guest here on VIBELAND Sports. We'll be back with our final segment right after this. And again, big thank you to Michael Catterson for taking the time to visit with us here on VIBELAND Sports. A very, very timely conversation, I think, and Michael's very good at what he does, and he brings out some very, very good points about what can be done to try and make games safer.
Definitely, and I think safety in football at all levels is something that has been at the forefront of the national conversation for the last several years, and hearing how the profession has evolved in order to implement the new science that we find out, and every time that we found out better ways to protect players, how that changes everything on that profession. You got to be a lifelong learner, and it's a tough job, but he did a great job. And thank you so much to Michael for coming on and talking with us.
This past week, huge news where politics meets sports, amateur sports, if you will. The California State Legislature has passed a bill that basically is fair pay for play. And what it does, it will enable college athletes in the state of California, beginning January 1st of 2023, to receive pay for endorsements. Now, not pay from the university or pay for just walking up off the streets and giving it to them, but it will be for endorsements. I see some good things with this. I see some real problems with this. To me, it's just a messy situation going forward. And now what it does is draw a battle line between one of the largest states population-wise in our country and the governing body of intercollegiate athletics, the NCCAA, or the NCAA. Now, I might tell you this, that all the California university systems, the Cal State University systems, Stanford and USC are all against this bill. Well, of course they are, because right now the way it's set up, all the money stays with the buckety bucks at the university. Now that money would not go directly to the university, it would go to the student athlete. What's your thoughts?
I think this is, first of all, a landmark legislation that this has been in talks for years now, and what to do with compensating college players. And so I think from that standpoint, you can get paid for your likeness now. You can get paid for endorsements. I'm okay with that. That seems fine to me. Again, I don't know. I think if you start paying the players directly from the university, that's when things get a little bit, I don't really like it all that much. But I think treat it like almost like the Olympics. Instead
Bingo.
of getting, instead of getting the some huge stipend to play, you're making money off of Wheaties commercials and putting your name out there.
They're basically making money off their own image.
Exactly.
And the universities are not doing it anymore.
Yes.
At first I had a problem with this, and there are some issues with it. It's a very messy situation. But the more I look at it, I don't have as big a problem with it because every university has big money boosters.
Yes.
Every university, if you're the University of Kansas and you want to pay a good football player to be the spokesman for your car dealership, you can do that just as well as anybody else can.
Totally agree. And that is something that I think you're going to start seeing. I think this breaks one of two ways. Either other states start to have similar legislation involved, and we start to see this be something that really sweeps across all over the nation, or I think that the NCAA could say, all right, well, as soon as you say that, then we're just going to exclude all California schools from the NCAA. And I think that could take us down a path that could have all the Power Five schools end up going and leaving the NCAA. So either way, if you're the NCAA right now, I would be a little bit nervous of this legislation. I think that it's going to change the way that college athletes look at where they want to go, and I think for in the short term, it could have a major recruiting advantage for all California schools. If you know that, okay, I'm between USC and the University of Oklahoma, and I can go to USC and actually make money on commercials and putting my likeness out there and that kind of thing. That may be the deciding factor for some kid out there. And so I think that the NCAA is going to have to make some kind of sweeping legislation where they either say it's good for everybody or California gets excluded, because they do not like that unequal weight when it comes to what you can give a player or what can be offered in terms of recruiting.
Here's what I like about it. It could affect all sports.
Oh, yeah.
OU has a heck of a gymnastics program. You think somebody in Norman wouldn't want some of those athletes maybe to be a sponsor of their product?
Oh, yeah.
They're making nothing right now. Nothing.
And they're out there winning national championships. Some of them go on to the Olympics.
How about women's sports? They could really benefit from this law. So, again, there's a lot of good to it. I just think it needs to be thought out a little bit more than maybe it has. I don't just think it's as simple as, okay, this is what you can and can't do.
And I'm sure that we're going to see multiple lawsuits come in the next several years, because this doesn't go into effect until 2023. And so I think this is going to get appealed multiple times, and these universities are going to do everything they can to maintain their iron grasp on all the dollars that come into the athletic programs right now. And so it could get nasty, but overall, I think it's a positive step in the right direction. And this is how I could see players in college actually making a living off of what they're doing and not having to be directly paid by the university, because that's always been my biggest qualm with it is, okay, if you set like a standard rate, well, in California, that doesn't go near as far as it does in Kansas. And so do you make it per capita? That gets into way too many questions. Then you get on to questions on, okay, well, do you pay per performance or just for making the team? I mean, so this way, it makes it to where anybody that wants to have their likeness used, you're able to go out there and have that done. And it's going to benefit, I think, a lot of student athletes, like you're saying, across multiple sports. And I hope that the NCAA realizes that this is where I think the future of college sports is heading.
LeBron James spoke out very highly of it. He said, you know what, I could not have gone to college. He said, my mom and I had nothing, less than nothing. He said, my image would have been used, and I still would have been poor. He said, this way, there's a lot of underprivileged kids that will have a chance now to have a little easier life as they go through the college process.
Exactly. I mean, his high school games were being broadcast on ESPN back in the day. So if anybody has a good perspective on this, it is LeBron. And he's been at the front of a lot of these similar issues like this, and fighting for players' rights and for especially amateur player rights. And so, again, I think there's a lot of people on that are for this, and I think it's a much easier way to get athletes some compensation than any other propositions that I've seen in the past.
I just think the basis of it is okay. I just think you've got the framework up. Now you've really got to work through it and think through it and make sure this is a process that's fair and equal to everybody and not just a handful of big-time schools.
Agreed.
You were talking about the NCAA. They actually responded less tersely than they had in previous opportunities and statements made about this sort of subject. Here's what they said. As more states consider their own specific legislation related to this topic, it is clear that a patchwork of different laws from different states will make unattainable the goal of providing a fair and level playing field for 1,100 campuses and nearly 500,000 student athletes nationwide. So you brought something up, too. You have to wonder if this isn't something that starts to pull at the string, and now we see the Power Five leave the NCAA.
I've been thinking that we were going to see that for the last 5 or 10 years. I keep waiting to. I don't think this is going to happen anytime in the next season or two, but I think long term, the NCAA is not going to be a viable institution for these Power Five schools, and it's legislation just like this where students can now use their likeness in order to receive compensation. That's where it starts, and then every major school is going to try to get something similar to that. And I think if they all came together and made their own league where they can make their own rules and they have the schools themselves have all the power in making these decisions rather than just the governing body of the NCAA telling them what they can do and passing it down, I think that seems very likely that we're going to see it in the future. I think that's why we've seen so much conference consolidation in the past few years and all this conference movement is because people are trying to position themselves. All these schools want to be in one of these conferences that are going to break away if that happens in the future. Now, I don't think it's a guarantee right now because I still think that the NCAA could see the writing on the wall and decide to, reverse course or change course to appease these schools. But it's something that I think everybody needs to be looking out for is some of these schools getting together and some of these conferences getting together and saying, why don't we just do it ourselves? We can do it better than the NCAA ever could. And if you don't think that the sponsorship dollars would follow them, you're crazy, because the NCAA is nothing without the schools that comprise it. No one wants to watch whoever's left in the American Conference play
Central Michigan and Toledo.
There you go. Nobody wants to watch that in the football, college football playoff. That's not going to be something that happens. Nobody wants to see that. March Madness is a totally different thing. I think that's where the NCAA gets it right a lot of the time. One of the few bright moments that I will give them. I just think that the NCAA needs to figure things out and be willing and open to change here, because again, ESPN knows that people want to watch OU play Texas, and if you can't do that because they have a contract with the NCAA, they're going to just break off that contract and they're going to make sure that they air the schools that people care about, regardless of what league they're in.
By the way, just let me throw this little comment in. Can I tell you how despicable Dish Network is?
Oh, man.
You know what they're doing now? They have blacked out the Fox networks.
All of them.
Which means tons of people around the country can't watch Big 12 football. They can't watch OU or OSU. And I'm not convinced, from what I've read, that Dish is ever going to bring them back.
Oof.
Which I think would be a very fatal move, because I can't believe people are just going to sit and accept that forever. But, they always paint it that they're doing it for the customer. BS. They're doing it because they think they're getting charged too high of a rate, and it's cutting into their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And people like my mom, who's 78 years old and lives and dies with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Oklahoma Sooners, can't watch them. She can't watch them.
On top of that, you have all those Sunday football games. You've got the MLB playoffs coming up. I mean, all of that are on Fox networks, and if you can't watch it on Dish, people are just gonna. I think you're gonna see mass migration away from it, and if they don't figure it out soon,
There's some areas, though, like where my mom lives,
Yikes.
she doesn't have a lot of options. But the woman's paying well over $100 and can't even watch the stuff she wants to watch. I just phooey on Dish Network.
Absolutely.
Hey, by the way, we were talking about the California legislation. That is this week's VIBELAND fan poll question of the week. It is, do you agree with new California legislation that will allow college athletes in that state to be paid? A, yes, B, no. Log on to our Twitter poll at VIBELAND Sports. Don't forget, there's several different ways each week for you to connect with us. You can subscribe to our podcast through Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at VIBELAND Sports, and on Facebook, VIBELAND Sports as well. Again, the fan poll question of the week: do you agree with new legislation in California that will allow college athletes in that state to be paid? A, yes, B, no. Speaking of baseball playoffs are upon us. And two are sitting in this room with no teams
Yep.
to choose from. For one of us, that's nothing new. For the other, I don't know what you're going to do, Cassidy. Which brings me to my first topic. We're also going to revisit our Major League Baseball picks.
Oh, boy.
Division picks from earlier in the year, too. What is going on in Boston? They're talking about they're going to cut down the payroll. Why? Why, you're 1 year removed from winning a World Series with that group. And it's not like money's an issue for the Boston Red Sox.
No. And some of the amount of salary that they are looking to get rid of, it's like what the Oklahoma City Thunder are paying in luxury tax right now. It's basically the same thing, but instead of the Thunder in a small market team, you're with the Boston freaking Red Sox, who are one of the most storied franchises and one of the most profitable franchises in all of Major League Baseball. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I thought that when Dave Dombrowski was shipped off, I really wondered what that meant for the future of this team. They're already trying to paint it right now as if Mookie Betts is the enemy, and they're trying to spin this thing before that his decision is made. So I don't know if we'll see Mookie in a Red Sox jersey next year. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of guys, JD Martinez, guys like that who are, I don't know if we're going to see them long term with the Red Sox right now. And I just really hope that they don't decide to just blow the whole thing up, because it's not working after 1 year. And look, there were some injuries for the pitching staff that hampered them. A horrible start. Just cannot get over the fact of how big of a hole that you can dig yourself in April and have lasting effects for the whole season. The Red Sox definitely did that. And then on top of that, were half game out of the wild card in July, lost 8 straight, never sniffed for the playoffs again from that point. And so there were definitely some downs this season for the Sox, but you are, as of today, as of October 1, you're still the defending World Series champions. And so that core team, you should do whatever you can to keep them together. I don't care what the salaries are going to look like. I'm just going to go on a quick little rant here about the Mookie Betts situation again, because you take him all the way from a prospect. He was your second baseman, but he was stuck behind Dustin Pedroia. Realized he's so good that we have to find a way to get him out there. You move him into the outfield. He becomes a Gold Glove guy. He becomes an MVP. That's the kind of guy that you want. And now you have that caliber of player on your team, and you're not going to pay him? That's the whole point of bringing a guy up through the farm system, is so that you can hopefully trade for a guy like Mookie Betts. Well, you have him on the roster. Whatever he's asking for, pay him. The guy is an elite player, and the numbers that he puts up every year and everything about his game fits very well with Boston and that Red Sox organization. I don't know what John Henry and the ownership there is doing right now. It is not exactly good times for the Red Sox as they were eliminated from playoff contention, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the season after winning the World Series and setting a franchise record for games won the previous year. But I just don't think that you blow the whole team up right now.
All right, the other big topic is the regular season is behind us. The Chicago Cubs, very, very talented, have been a perennial playoff participant the last several years. Total collapse. You think the Red Sox collapsed. Their
Yikes.
collapse came earlier than the Cubs, who was fatal. I mean, they went from leading that division, and two things happened. The Cardinals got hot and the Cubs collapsed, but now Joe Madden is out. A lot of people have speculated that Theo Epstein wanted Madden out last year, went ahead and stayed with him, and he is gone. Cubs fans don't always agree with Madden being out, but when you have the payroll the Cubs have, when you have the expectations that franchise has now, when you have had the past success that this franchise has had, and you were in position to perhaps repeat again that previous success, and you collapse, there's 3 people that could go. It ain't going to be Theo Epstein.
Nope.
It's not going to be the players. You don't fire the players. So who does that leave? Joe Madden, and he's on the streets. He's not going to be there for long. Somebody's going to pick him up, but I didn't have a problem. I think Madden is strange. I think some of the ways he does things after a while wears on people and maybe doesn't work as well as it used to. He had a heck of a run, won a World Series in Chicago, but maybe it's time for some change there on the north side.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they had like you're saying, a big collapse. 9 straight losses there that just, shot themselves in the foot as at the worst possible moment that they could. Were right there contending again for the division title, and they just couldn't get it done. So with that much talent and that kind of payroll that they have, you have got to find a way into the playoffs. And I think that for the Cubs, it's going to be back to the drawing board for them when they come. Bring in a new head coach, see what you can do with them, but just change the whole culture of what's going on there. It didn't work this season. I'm not saying blow it up. I'm just saying tweak some things. And bringing in a new head coach is exactly the kind of thing that can turn a really good franchise into a great franchise. You look no further than the team we were just talking about, the Boston Red Sox. Bring in a brand new manager. He wins the World Series his first year. Alex Cora. That was really the difference on that team. They were down a couple of players going into that season. I wasn't all that high on them, and Alex Cora just was able to get everybody on the same page and immediately get them to the most wins they'd ever had. I'm not saying that whoever coach you pick up is going to win the Cubs a record number of games, but I think that at this point, Madden has served his purpose with that franchise. He got them that World Series ring, and now you look elsewhere to move forward.
Some things I think about the Cubs. One, they absolutely missed on Craig Kimbrell. Signed him to a huge deal, and I think that's going to hurt them on the free agent market. You still only have so much money, and you were on the books for some big-time money with Craig Kimbrell. Some other questions I have is, who is their biggest internal free agent they're going to sign? I'm just going to take a stab, and I'm not a Cubs fan, but I think it's probably Nick Castellanos, and he is going to be very expensive after having a breakout year. Mm-hmm. Scott Boras will capitalize on Castellanos' success the year in the Windy City. And you touched on this, will the Cubs shake up their inner core? Will they do that via trade? That remains to be seen how Theo Epstein plays his hand. What about the coaching staff? How many, if any, of those guys come back? And what are the Cubs going to look for in their new manager to replace Joe Madden? So I think those are 5 really, really big questions that are facing Cubs fans in the offseason, and certainly the guy in charge, Theo Epstein.
Yes. And look, Theo's been able to get it done. If there's anybody out there that I would trust to get a franchise back on the right track, even if it's just off for a year, Theo Epstein is that guy. I mean, the guy that brought World Series rings to both Boston and to the Cubs. I mean, come on. That guy has earned all the respect, and I have all the faith in the world that he's going to make sure that the Cubs are moving in the right direction. And I think they want to get that manager situation sorted out as soon as possible. And that way they can start then looking at personnel, because I think depending on the manager situation, that could change who you look at and who you try to go after moving forward.
Going to be interesting. A lot of managers going to be available for new jobs and looking for new jobs over the winter. Kansas City will be looking for a new manager, and this is just a personal deal. I'm not going to get into a big deal. Ned Yost said so long. Ned Yost, I have not agreed with everything that man has done. But let me tell you something. Ned Yost helped guide, maybe in a little quirky way, but helped guide the Royals to back-to-back World Series appearances and a World Championship in 2015. And Ned Yost, is one of the biggest players managers you're ever going to find in Major League Baseball. He was great for Kansas City. And again, did he have his share of blunders? You better believe he did. But he and Dayton Moore aren't perfect because they're playing with an owner at the time that wants to be very chintzy about things. But, by the way, thank you. On behalf of this Royals fan, thank you, Ned, for what you did. You have enjoyed 41 years in Major League Baseball. Go enjoy your ranch in Georgia and live a good life. So, anyway, the Royals will be in the market for a new manager as well after losing, again, more than 100 games for the second straight year. All right, you can hear this episode, or you can go back and revisit any of our previous shows, again, through Apple Podcast or Spotify. And I bring that up because we're going to revisit a podcast, just you and I, just for a minute, that we did back in April. It's our Major League Baseball picks. And we'll be doing this at the end of the NFL season, too, as well. And we'll be doing it with the NBA season, I'm sure. Here's what we picked. Cassidy, you picked the AL East. Mm-hmm. You took Boston and the Yankees. In the Central, I picked Cleveland over Minnesota. And KP broke down the American League West. He took Houston over Oakland. So we were okay. I mean, the Yankees, bad. You had them in the playoffs. I had Cleveland in the playoffs and not Minnesota, because my wild card teams were the Yankees and Tampa Bay, which I got that one right. And then, of course, KP had Oakland. So nice work, I guess, all in all, on the part of the VIBELAND sports staff.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody expected Minnesota to have that good of a season. I
thought they could have a good year. And if you go back and revisit that show, I said I thought it was a big year for the Twins and Paul Molitor. Can they finally turn the corner, because the expectations were there? I just thought Cleveland had a little too much veteran experience on the Twins, and that's why I gave them the edge.
Yeah, I didn't see the Twins, reaching 100 wins this season and being just as dominant as they have been all season, but they really turned it on, and they've been playing very, very well. And that's one of those teams that every once in a while one just will sneak up, and a team that you think's going to be really good turns into just a world beater. And let's see if they can get it done in the postseason.
I'll tell you what I missed on the Atlanta Braves. I thought they were going to be close, but I thought they would take a step back, some 88 wins maybe. Well, they won mid-90s and were very, very good, repeated as NL East champions. I had Washington and the Mets at the start of the season, with Atlanta third, Philadelphia fourth. Glad to say I nailed the Phillies and their $330 million prize pupil, Bryce Harper, to finish where they did. In the Central, KP had Chicago over St. Louis, maybe a little bit of a homer pick there, but that's not a stretch to say the Cubs were going to win the division. No. He picked Milwaukee third. You had the Dodgers over Colorado, and the Rockies were a huge disappointment this summer. The way they finished up, New York won the East, Minnesota the Central, and Houston the West in the American League, with Oakland and Tampa Bay the wild cards, Atlanta in the East, St. Louis in the Central, the Dodgers in the West in the National League, with Milwaukee and Washington in the wild card game. So, not bad.
We did all right, I think.
Not bad. Baseball's a hard sport to pick.
It really is, and it's so difficult from year to year. You just don't know. 162 game season, there's so much that can happen. Injuries, teams get hot. Just when you're facing certain teams, one series can turn your entire season around, or can tank your entire season. And for overall, though, I'm pretty pleased with that.
All right, next week, we're trying to get a big-time fish landed. and we're going to get him on. I just would really like to have him next week, but that's all we can tell you right now. But it will happen, if not next week, at some point. So that's going to wrap up our show. Want to thank you again for tuning us in, whether it's via Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media at VIBELAND Sports on Twitter and Instagram, VIBELAND Sports on Facebook. Our question of the week, again, we discussed this ad nauseum. Do you agree with the new California legislation that will allow college athletes in that state to be paid? A, yes, B, no, at VIBELAND Sports on Twitter. Next week, we hope KP is alive, well, and back with us. And if not, you and I hold down the ship another week.
That's right.
All right, that's going to do it for Casady Fletcher. I'm Todd Miller. VIBELAND Sports is a weekly presentation of VIBELAND, Inc.